This week's guest on the podcast is one of the most prolific and award-winning comedy creatives in the industry. He wrote some of your favorite Old Spice Terry Crews spots, the Old Spice Mandroid campaign, and several other award-winning Old Spice campaigns.
Nope, I was right. It's a really weird commercial for soap.
He created the epic Apocalypse spot for Apple, the first and only KFC spot featuring a female Colonel Sanders,
I'm definitely not a woman.
the best Kevin Bacon commercial ever made,
This valley's just one long smorgasbord. They're under the ground. It's Tremors.
and perhaps the most ambitious advertising campaign ever created.
While most brands are making elaborate commercials to air during the big game, Skittles is going with a different approach.
Instead of an ad, a Broadway show.
Skittles
the musical.
Which he not only came up with his partner Ruth Belotti, but he also wrote the entire musical.
This might have been a bad idea.
So stay tuned for an interview with my dear friend and one of my favorite creatives, Nathaniel Lawlor. But first, the podcast theme song, which also just happens to have been written, composed, and sung by Nathaniel.
It's Jason Bagley's advertising podcast. He interviews important people, it's true. But that doesn't mean that you're not important, 'cause he didn't choose to interview you. Maybe he was just planning to contact you to interview you on another day. Or maybe he doesn't have your email address. Every creature on the planet is important in their own special way. Cows, sharks, and gazelles deserve to be interviewed. Birds and whales each have a valid point of view. I mean, they're probably not as interesting to talk to as you, but you're less interesting than the person on this show. It's true, I'm not sure what my point is.
Thanks for joining me today. I, as you know, based on the fact that I've hired you a million times, I'm a big fan of your work. Wanted to have you just take us through 3 of your campaigns that I'm a huge fan of. I think most of the world is a big fan of. So, talk to us.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, thanks for doing this, and it's actually been really fun. It's been a fun process to go back and look at some of this stuff and dig through. As your students will see, we've put together a deck, Jason and I, that is kind of deconstructs like the process behind some of these campaigns and looks at all the everything it takes to create a good piece of work. I think sort of the theme of this is to debunk this notion that like good work just sort of magically appears, like in reality, there's so much work behind it. And it's certainly some part of it is just pure luck. A huge part of it is hard work and like you said, just sort of, insane attention to detail and some kind of magical team behind it is usually an ingredient, right? Like the right people coming together. So it's a confluence of a lot of different things, and we're going to get a little bit into the part of it today that is like the creative process, which to show you a little bit about how these campaigns came about.
Cool.
I have to be on a work call in like 15 minutes. Is that going to be enough time for this? Okay, so the first campaign we want to talk about is Skittles commercial, the Broadway musical. This was a project that I did along with a bunch of people, among them Ruth Belotti and Ari Weiss, who still heads up DDB, and he had brought us on to work on Skittles the year previous, actually, to do a campaign for Super Bowl. And we weren't the first ones to do this by any means. In fact, we looked to some of the Droga work as like a model of how to kind of hack the Super Bowl. There was that Band of Brands ad that they had done, and some other stuff as well that had been done out there. And the idea was like, basically, we didn't have money to be on the Super Bowl. Like, we didn't have that kind of money, but we had some money, and we wanted to get sort of Super Bowl sized attention, so to speak, without actually being on the Super Bowl. So it's a earned media grab, basically. And the year before, we had come up with an idea to create a Super Bowl ad and only show it to one single person, right? Just to be dumb and just to and then we turned that into a whole idea. And that's a whole other thing. We won't get into that campaign right now. But this was the next year and the assignment was the same. So we had to do something, we had to repeat the assignment, but obviously, do something bigger and better than the previous year. So first we will watch a 2-minute long synopsis video. So this is the case study, just to familiarize anybody who hasn't seen the campaign.
While most brands are making elaborate commercials to air during the big game, Skittles is going with a different approach.
Instead of an ad, a Broadway show.
Skittles the musical.
This might have been a bad idea.
Yep, we skipped the Super Bowl and instead made a Broadway musical all about how horrible and manipulative advertising is. Then we charged people $200 to watch it.
You have to buy a ticket to see an ad.
Yeah, it's a real Broadway show.
Bad marketing idea.
Maybe, but the story blew up and the show sold out in 2 days. Then we dropped the cast album on Spotify and a music video, which didn't exactly celebrate the biggest marketing day of the year. And that blew up too. On Super Bowl Sunday, fans flocked to 43rd and Broadway, where they discovered shirts and posters and vinyl records. Bootleg shirts sold outside made an appearance in the show, as did fake ads in the custom playbill.
It makes me spend money I don't even have, buying hundreds of shoes I don't need.
These 1,500 people would witness an ad which took months to plan and rehearse and would never be shown on TV or the web.
If I could ever trust a faceless multinational corporation again. This might have been a big mistake.
You'd think so, but the campaign was named Funniest Super Bowl Commercial of 2019, despite not being on the Super Bowl at all.
The most inventive run in the history of ambush advertising.
Renders every other ad actually playing during the Super Bowl pointless.
The future of Super Bowl ads doesn't include TV or football.
Yeah, exactly. Because Skittles the Musical became the most talked about ad of the entire game, without spending a penny on the Super Bowl.
Broadway the rainbow. Taste the rainbow.
Well, most of those claims are true.
Hang on. Dan. Let me use my applause effect.
Oh, that was loud. So yeah, that was the idea in a nutshell. And I was starting to talk about how we came about, how we came on this idea. So the original inception of the idea and how it never would have happened without a great ECD, right? So we were showing a bunch of ideas to Ari Weiss, and we had this page at the end of our 10-page deck with just a bunch of or we could do this, or we could do that, or we could do that. And I specifically remember that we went over the whole deck, and he was like, well, there's an idea in there that I think is really interesting. And we were like, okay. And he was like, it's the Broadway play. And we were like, huh, interesting. Because we had given more thought to probably 6 or 7 other ideas. And I'm not showing every page of every deck here, but I'm going to take you through some various different decks and stuff that decks and Word docs and things that we dug up from the process of all these campaigns we're looking at today. Excerpts, so to speak. So anyway, he was interested in that idea, and he wanted us to blow it out more. So that's what we did. And that just goes to show, we probably never would have given another thought to that idea if he hadn't pulled it out. And Ari is a master of seeing the big picture and knowing what is going to get PR and get attention, and what kind of thing has legs, and he was the perfect person to be working on that with.
Big shout out to Ari Weiss. Everybody go work for Ari.
Oh, hell yeah. He's great. So developing the idea plus a bunch of other ideas. So this was probably the first page. We just sort of slightly wrote it up as more than a single sentence. And there was a bunch of other ideas we had too. Among them are fake PR. We had this idea what we really wanted was to get a bunch of good PR around the ad. So we thought, well, what if we just make the PR ourselves? And that's the ad. We make all these fake PR clips and that said this Super Bowl campaign that Skittles did was the best campaign ever made. And there actually isn't a campaign. Skittles Super Bowl ad, the movie. I mean, what creative hasn't put this in their deck? We're going to make a movie. We actually have I think Skittles is the one brand that has an interesting enough universe that it could actually carry a movie. And later on, we actually did develop a Netflix show, which ended up not happening. But we also wrote a full novel, which we'll talk about a little bit later for Skittles. So unfortunately, this campaign was the last Super Bowl thing we did for Skittles. They didn't do anything the next couple of years, and they're not doing anything this year, to my knowledge. They changed their marketing tact. So we did this 2 Super Bowl campaigns, and then we had a lot of other ones in the queue, other ideas that we were excited about, and they never happened. But such is the way of advertising. The Never Ending Skittles Super Bowl ad. There was a bunch of other ideas. That just gives you a sense that like there were a bunch of ideas we were still following at this point. We went to the client with 3 ideas. I took out the other 2 in this particular thing just in the interest of time. I'll show you what the client deck looked like. This was just the section of the deck that talked about the Skittles musical. And the point here is like we were selling the idea, not the execution. We didn't have a play written yet. We didn't even know what it was going to be about. We just knew that turning your Super Bowl ad into a Broadway musical and not running it on the Super Bowl, but instead running it in a theater on Broadway was an interesting idea. We knew we could figure out what the ad was going to be, what the show rather was going to actually be, and what all the ads that go around it were going to be. But at this stage, we were just selling them on the big idea. So this was a deck we took them through. Every brand dreams of running their ad on the Super Bowl.
We'll get back to Nathaniel and Jason in a moment, but if you want to listen to the full version of this episode and all other Bagley Talks to an Important Person episodes, check out Creative Mega Machine, Jason's exclusive 8-week creative coaching and mentorship program where Jason throws 6 metric tons of highly illegal, non-EPA approved rocket fuel on your career. Creative Mega Machine is a time machine for your career, teaching you exactly how to get the best work of your life about a decade earlier than you would otherwise. Through on-demand lessons and live Q&As with Jason, he will personally answer all your questions as he reveals all the secrets and techniques that he and his teams use to create iconic campaigns for Nike, Old Spice, KFC, Meow Wolf, and more. You will learn in 8 weeks what took him 16 years at Wieden and Kennedy to learn. There is absolutely nothing out there that will accelerate your creativity and earning potential faster than this 5-star rated program. Classes are capped at 20 students, so grab your spot before they're gone. Check out the show notes below to learn more about Creative Mega Machine. Let's get back to the podcast.
But what if we could get even more attention than all those brands by not running our Super Bowl ad on the Super Bowl? Introducing Skittles Super Bowl ad, the musical. And we always talk about a PR headline. I think with any kind of idea that's like a earned media grab or a stunt or whatever you want to call it, and a lot of our briefs these days are, you always want to think about what is the PR headline, because that's really, at the end of the day, that's what you're trying to get. Most of the time, as Ari loves to say, 10 people are going to see this actual thing. What everyone's going to see is the headline, right? So it needs to be something that works in a headline. So the new Skittles Super Bowl ad is a 2-hour Broadway musical. Not the most imaginative fake headline, but that was just for the time being that would have to do. So we I'm not going to go through every word of this deck, of course, but like we talked about sort of the ad itself. We talk about the lead up. What are we going to do in the weeks before? What are we going to do on the day of? What's the story going to be about? We have a synopsis here of a story idea, which I don't even remember what it is, honestly, but I can guarantee this is not what the show ended up being about. It was just basically a placeholder example. And then there's a bunch of pictures that Ruth Belotti pulled.
And I think this is a really important point, Nathaniel, that you're making is sometimes I think as creatives, we can get caught up, and this I think comes with experience, learning not to do this, a little too obsessed with thinking that we have to solve the whole thing and that we have to we got to literally write half of the musical. And at this point, your goal is just get them to see how big this idea is, make the concept and the stunt really clear. And that's it. It doesn't matter if everything changes later. I mean,
I thought you were going to say something about putting spread apart butt cheeks in a client presentation, but I agree with what you're saying. I mean, I take your point further, and I want to caveat this by saying that, like, when you're early in your career, I think it's good to like actually write out. And pardon me, I have a bad cold and a cough right now, so just have to bear with that. But I think it's very valuable early on in a career, especially always, but especially early on, to do lots of actual writing scripts. But I would say, like, a lot of times too, depending on what the idea is, like, I might write even my scripts as sort of just blurbs. Like, I don't necessarily have to script out every script. It's like I can be more nimble and come up with more ideas and spread the net wider if I'm writing them out as like a short paragraph. Like in this script, especially scripts that aren't very dialogue heavy. Like, you know, in this script, a guy is walking down the street and he blah, 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 blah. And just like, so that the idea comes across in the paragraph, and you get what the script's going to be about. And it's like, that keeps me more working faster, because if I can, you know, present more ideas on the first round, then we can start to narrow it down, and then I can start to script up the ones and spend more time getting into the details. So I'll do that a lot of times, like on a very first round.
What doesn't work is the reverse, where it works if you have a great concept that's really clear, then you don't need to script that out at this stage. What doesn't work is when creatives are like, they don't have a great concept, they have an execution idea that's like, our idea is we're going to write a movie. And I don't know, we don't know what it is yet, but it's going to be really great when we write it. It's like, then you have nothing. You don't have a concept, and you don't have any writing.
You mean like this one I presented to Ari?
Yes, exactly that one. Terrible.
Yeah. So, okay. Let's look at the internal exploration deck. So once we sold this big idea to the client that we were going to do a musical, they loved it. That was our recommendation, and they loved it, and they were on board. Obviously, now we have to prove it out and see what is this thing actually going to be. So this is a very long deck. I'm not going to read through every word, but like basically I'll take you through, and like I remember this page as being interesting because what we did was we did a huge exploration of this, and we came up with a lot of like pillar points, like important points that were true for us about this idea, and we wrote them down, and it really was helpful. So I will read these. We said that the idea, that whatever this is, it needs to be fairly simple. The concept needs to read instantly at a glance. Skittles made a Super Bowl ad as a Broadway show. Therefore, anything too layered and complicated might overshadow the concept. It needs to feel like Broadway at a glance. It can't be too many steps removed from the classic tropes of Broadway shows. Otherwise, again, the concept will get lost. It needs to feel like a Super Bowl ad, but also like Skittles. Skittles doesn't do explosions and puppies and nut kicks in their ads. Therefore, we think that would be wrong for this. So the sort of typical tropes, because you can imagine like, oh, a Super Bowl ad on Broadway, it's going to have like puppies and, you know, horses and people getting kicked in the nuts and beer and like, but that didn't feel right for this brand. So we were trying to find, what exactly this is going to be. Book of Mormon works because it parodies two things people are already familiar with: Mormons and Broadway musicals. Therefore, we might want to follow that formula by parodying the world of advertising, which is on people's minds around Super Bowl. And in fact, that is what we did. Whatever it is, it needs a story, because stories are what keep people's attention. If it's too conceptual and lacks strong story, I worry we'll lose people. So that was just like a lot of like discoveries as we did an exploration of like the things that, and that was helpful for us. Like, because I guess the point to learn here is that a lot of the first few rounds of concepting for me are about figuring out what doesn't work first. And that's why I get so irritated when a client or when an agency is like, they want us to do work and turn it around in like first presentation, internal presentations, like 4 days later or something. It's like, I need I need 4 or 5 days just to write all the stuff that's wrong first, and that will start to get me to what's right. And when I don't have time to do that, the work suffers, because that's part of the creative exploration. And it's just how I get to a good end result, figuring out what doesn't work. Play ideas. So I remember this, and this is an interesting point that I was telling Jason about, is that for a long time, even well after the idea was sold and well after we had a production company on board, Smuggler, Patrick Milling-Smith, who's amazing, and I want to give a big plug for Smuggler and the work they do. They were a huge, huge part of the Broadway musical coming to life. Even after we were well into the process, we were still debating, and everyone was kind of leaving it up to me at this point. Ruth had gone on to another project at this point, so I was just like the only creative on this, and along with a very supportive team, but I was the lead on this. So it was kind of left up to me, and we were debating about whether it should be a dramatic play, because I thought there was something really interesting about doing like a sort of Henry Ibsen, like Arthur Miller, like very serious, dramatic Broadway show. Like you go see, Kill a Mockingbird, written by Aaron Sorkin on Broadway, and like it's a drama, and that's one of the classic tropes of Broadway, is the drama. And then the other classic trope, of course, arguably a bigger trope, is the Broadway musical. And we were sort of looking at both directions. And for a long time, we were undecided, because the purist in me thought it would be pretty funny to kind of go the route of creating this incredibly serious, dramatic play. Even like the goal was in our minds was like, could we make people like cry in our Broadway play, Skittles play? Yeah. Ultimately, we went with the Broadway musical for a lot of reasons. The obvious ones being just that, like, it seemed to have more mass appeal. It seemed to sort of fit the kind of big, loud, boisterous energy of Super Bowl better. It came along with assets like songs and things that we could then use in all of our various different tentacles that we were putting out there to, with all our paid media and stuff. So it made more sense, and that's the route we went. But we did a lot of exploration of other ideas. There's a ton of ideas in here. I mean, these are all different ideas that we were thinking. Like the drama we were going to do was going to be this sort of existentialist play where these people were in a house, and the house had a Skittles leak in the ceiling, like the famous like that Skittles ad that was made years ago by, I believe, Craig and Eric. I'm not sure if they made that one, but it's a great classic Skittles ad, and we were going to borrow that. And in this play, there was just going to be a house, the interior of a house on the stage, and the Skittles leak was going to be slowly filling the house with Skittles over the course of the play. And the people in the house, it was sort of like an existential metaphor where they were just like on borrowed time, and they were slowly drowning in Skittles. And it was just this drama about these people that were dying slowly. There's so many other ideas here. I mean, stuck in a musical, guy who doesn't want to go to a Skittles musical. Would we make a story about a guy whose wife drags him to a Broadway musical instead of watching the Super Bowl, and he's pissed, and then he becomes part of the show? And the ad presentation, the ad exec, the Skittles god, ad exec blunder. This is a very in-depth idea here, some more than others. Land of Dead Ideas, the bodega, which is kind of ended up being part of the idea. So that actually did get folded in. So the Pinata Man extended story, like taking the Pinata Man character and making a bigger story about his life. The raccoon was this other idea we had from a previous Skittles thing that we thought could make a good story. God, there's so many here. I mean, the copywriter, I guess that's about me. Production design ideas, like could we do a Skittles monsoon? Could Skittles fill the stage? We did have, one of the things about the bodega that was pretty interesting was that it says, not sure exactly what the story is yet, but we could have a set that looks exactly like a small bodega, and the entire play takes place in the market. with various characters coming and going. But the twist is that the audience is allowed, even encouraged, to come up on stage at any point and buy Skittles from the counter. And when they do, the characters in the play would interact with them. So we're getting like pretty deep now into like the creative execution of a Broadway musical, which is not really like super relevant to our advertising work, but it's just kind of fun to explore. And I guess you could say that the same process of creative exploration would apply to a lot of ideas we do. And just in that, like, it takes a lot, it took us thinking of a lot of different ideas, and some little bits and pieces of different ones came together for the final idea.
And how was it? How was the decision made, Nathaniel, on like what you went with? Because as we can see, there's a lot of different avenues that you could have gone and that you explored. Was that just
Yeah, it was just like, mostly it would be like conversations with like me and Ari, and like Ruth was probably in there. I'm sure I called you at some point in that and said like, hey, we've got this thing or this thing. Like, what's your gut? What do you think is best? That's a good point. I use a lot of other people. I have my trusted inner circle, and I go to people and I just say, hey, look, I've got these 2 scripts. What's your gut? Which one's funnier? Because, a lot of times I'm just in a situation and I'm indecisive, and I can't figure out, I'm too close to it or something. I think, we had, by the way, this deck you just saw was like _1, and it went up to like _12 or something. So there was so many rounds of like, and we start narrowing it down in conversations with our CD, who's Ari in this case. And like, and we end up with 5 ideas instead of 20. And then we end up with 3 that are rising to the surface. And then we have a lot of debate, and we just poke holes at them, and we try to beat them up a bit and see like what still stands, and ask a lot of other people. And and being honest with ourselves, right? Like, I had to be honest with myself at the end about like the drama versus the musical, and be like, I know that the musical is the better choice for this campaign and this brand, even though like selfishly I wanted to do the drama, just because I think that would have been like a more kind of just like a weirder thing to do, just from my perspective. But I did agree with that the musical was like the right choice in that case.
So one of the things I'm hearing there is like, over time, and this does take time, but like try to develop an inner circle that you trust of other creatives that you can bounce stuff off of. Because sometimes you can really get down a rabbit hole on it, especially when you're really going deep on an idea like a Broadway musical, and it's very easy to sort of lose track of like, you're so deep in it. How do you know what's good and what's bad? So it's good to have people you can bounce it off to that are outside of it, that aren't as involved.
Yeah. I mean, in the old days, it was just go down the hall and like stop in your friend's office or your cubicle or whatever, and like the other creatives that are working with you. And with more working from home now, I mean, same thing though. It's like, it might be a little more challenging for me, obviously. Yeah. It's like people I've been working with for years. Quickly, I'll take you through this evolution of the show poster, which is essentially just a print ad, right? So it was the poster we created, and it did actually run as a print ad, and it was made into an actual poster, of course, and it appeared on like bus sides and things like that in different shapes. But I think it's interesting to go through it. There were 10 times as many executions, and I'm only showing a few of them, but I just wanted to give you the sense that like I started doing like a crappy like Photoshop exploration of like concepts, and I would usually do these with pencil sketches, to be honest. And I think maybe I had done that, but I just started going into Photoshop and fucking around, not worried at all about whether it looks good. And I think like I get really annoyed in our business when a CD supposedly insists on seeing stuff in a polished deck. I'm just like, well, then that person needs to change their expectations, because that's a waste of time. It's a waste of time to like polish like a first round of scripts. Like I deliver it in a Word doc, and that should be good enough, because we're looking for an idea at that stage. We're not looking for an execution. So, obviously these are garbage in terms of their execution, but they're just like, I was trying to get a sense for myself of like what this might look like. And these were just some ideas. And you can see through the copy here that the ones on the two sides, that was like one of the challenges. And I know you've faced this with various Old Spice ideas before, Jason, is like you do something weird. And like one of your immediate challenges is like letting people know that this isn't a joke. We're actually doing this thing. And I specifically remember the bear you guys did for the bear holder, Old Spice holder, and how you literally had like this is an actual product that we actually made. And I always remember that. And I'm like, oh yeah, I need to like turn that into a joke or something. So then it was like, okay, it needs to have something to do with the cat, because the cat started at this stage, the cat was playing into the story, and we knew that. So we were thinking like, okay, the poster needs to have something to do with the cat. So I think that's where these came from. I actually love this one on the left, and I kind of wish we had done it. It's sort of super weird and creepy in a fun way. Then we brought in a designer, and we gave them a brief of a cat, and we gave them some of the references of the old Skittles ads that like Craig and Eric had made back in the day, and a bunch of other people with the typography. Some people gravitated towards this middle one, and we started playing with that. Skittles Super Bowl ad. This one on the right was like, we tried some different typography for the Super Bowl ad part, and we started to separate it, I think was the idea. Then we got a piece of bad news, and we sort of knew this was coming, but we thought we had gotten around it. The NFL basically told us, you can't use Super Bowl unless we have final say over the script, and we knew they weren't going to okay the script because of the content in it, and it was like pretty edgy and stuff. People die in it, and like it was just that we knew that was just going to be a total headache. So we had to face the unfortunate reality that we had to scrub the word Super Bowl from the entire show, from all the lyrics of all the songs, from the poster, of course, from the name of the thing. And I was really, really bummed about that. And I thought, oh, this is a devastating blow. And we went around with so many different versions of what it was going to be called. And ultimately, we landed on Skittles Commercial, the Broadway Musical. And in a way, it's funny because looking back on it now, and I think we even said this at the time, like we were like, we're not even going to remember this was an issue later. And it's true. Like now I'm almost like, in a way, this is kind of dumber and funnier. The biggest concern was like, we needed people to understand that this was a Super Bowl ad that was removed from the game and put onto Broadway stage. So like that needed to come through. And because we couldn't say Super Bowl anymore, and then there's the horrible alternative of a big game, that everybody has to use, and it always feels a little dirty when you have to use that. So we kind of used that, we jujitsu'd that and sort of used it to our advantage. I remember when I had written a lot of different lines, and I came up with the line, "This year's biggest ad won't be on the big game," and we were like, okay, that's it. We just sort of knew like that's the line, and that's what like sums everything up. It makes big game more palatable because there's the alliteration with biggest ad, big game. It explains the concept in a sentence. And the information at the bottom was also very intentional. We put the date and the one show only and the Town Hall Theater and tickets at Ticketmaster. Every one of those pieces of information was very carefully thought about because we needed it to be clear that this was a real thing that was really happening on a real day and you could really buy tickets. So just a lot of work went into the poster because at the end of the day, like we thought of the poster as basically being like the thing more people would see than anything else. So like we needed all the work we were doing, and we produced an entire fucking Broadway musical. And like all of that work, we knew that most people were never going to see it. And that the entire idea had to be conveyed through this one single page print ad, basically. And, you had to like get the whole concept just by looking at this. So that was a lot of work. But I think that, sometimes the lesson here, I guess, is that sometimes like, not just sometimes, I would say, and I bet you would agree with this, Jason, almost most of the time you come up with you encounter some obstacle that you think is the end of everything. Like, oh no, we can't use Super Bowl. The whole effing thing is ruined now. And like, you always find a workaround and you get around it. And ultimately it can make you a better writer because it forces you to think creatively, think on your feet, come up with an alternate solution. Or the client says, yeah, we still want to shoot this script, but we can't mention this whole thing now, part of the product that part of the dialogue was about. And you're like, oh my God, but that was like the whole basis of the joke in the script. And like, now it's ruined. And it feels like you're having to start over. And we always like huff and puff about it a lot as creatives, and it's ruined again, and I do. I mean, I still do. But the bottom line is like, I've always come out of those situations with something as good or even better sometimes. So one door closes, another door opens is another way you could say that, I guess.
That's a great quote from Chicken Soup for the Soul, your favorite book. But I have so many examples like that where it seemed like the end of the world, and it was a devastating blow at the time. And that it either ended up not being a big deal or it ended up actually making it better. And I have probably the ultimate example from my work is we had a bodybuilder sitting on a plane waiting for takeoff. This is, back in the day, they hadn't shut the door yet of the plane to go film what became the Terry Crews campaign, a different actor ready to go to LA to shoot it. And we got news that there was some past steroid. He didn't die. There were some steroid convictions for bodybuilding in the past, and that was a problem for P&G. And so the whole shoot was canceled indefinitely. And obviously we were devastated, but it ended up being the best thing ever, because when the project got going again, we ended up finding Terry Crews, who was clearly, now you look at that and you're like, who could have ever possibly done that besides Terry Crews?
Right.
So,
yeah, that same lesson can be applied to any of your students who were just dumped by their partner.
Yeah.
Just think how much better your next partner is going to be.
For sure.
Yeah, so that was the Skittles Broadway. I mean, we could talk about this single campaign for like hours because it was such a massive project, and it was genuinely the like funnest and the hardest creative project I've ever worked on in my entire career and personal life. It was just massive and super rewarding and almost killed me. And but you know what? It was like a chance to pursue like a passion project basically, because in college I studied film writing, film producing, production, and as well as playwriting. And I like wrote a play in college that was part of this festival of plays at UC Santa Cruz, and it was a really fun time, and I really enjoyed it. And this was like a chance to go back and like revisit that passion, that personal passion of mine of like writing longer form. And so yeah, I mean, there's probably a lesson there too, which is just like, find ways to make creative projects, like turn them into your passion projects, because you're gonna do your best work when you're like passionate about it. I mean, if you love illustrating, then try to come up with an ad that's illustrated and illustrate it yourself. I've done that from doing little drawings and stuff. If you really, really want to work on music or something, you could come up with a musical idea. I've done that too. I mean, I personally like a lot of the stuff we're showing today is exactly that.
100%. And that's like, I talk to the students about, finding your voice, and that can be a very confusing statement. Like, what is my voice? How do I know your voice is basically what you love, what you love the most, what you're the most obsessed with, what you enjoy making and watching. That's the biggest clue of what your voice is. And I think this thing would never have been as good as it was if it wasn't subject matter and a style, and everything about it was things that you love, things that you like geek out on making awesome and really spending it. That's the only way this can happen, because the amount of time that you had to put into this is just, it's unthinkable. Like people would it would blow their mind how much love and time and effort, and probably you probably wept and cried and lost your mind at various points. And I mean, it's funny. I say that half
more likely made other people cry, but yeah.
But yeah, it's when you do something this incredible, and this is one of my favorite things, not only that you've done, Nathaniel, but it's one of my favorite things that's ever been done in advertising for me personally, because it's just so ambitious, it's so audacious, it's so crazy, and I want to make it a requirement. It's required homework for everybody in my program that you go
to write a musical. To write a full musical.
Write a 2-hour musical. No, to go to Nathaniel's website and watch the 5-minute kind of summary. It's a 5 minutes, basically clips from the actual musical.
45-minute musical condensed into like 5 minutes. Yeah.
Because it is so incredibly insane and great, and it's just kind of mind blowing. So you got to go to his website and check that out. All right, let's keep going.
Well, thanks. It's kind of it's funny too, because it's interesting to hear you say it's one of your favorite things, because it's like on the surface, to me, it sounds almost as dumb as saying, we're going to make a movie for our chocolate bar brand, or like our macaroni and cheese. We're going to make a movie. It's like, it's such a I think like the right ingredients were in place in this case, and it kind of worked. But yeah, I mean, it's worth saying that like no one wants to watch a movie of Liberty Mutual Insurance. Like know your brand and like know what is interesting. Like, you know, and we talked before about like, you know, about I was saying that like I always start like, I'm always like looking at every idea that I come up with through like, I try to be like rigorously honest, like brutally honest about it. Like, would I want to see this thing? Like, this is just a sort of a little tangent, because I remember we were having a conversation about this last week. Would I want to see this thing? I think in the case of Skittles, the musical, it's like the answer is yeah, that's actually interesting. And only because, by the way, so many great creatives created this whole amazing universe for Skittles way before I was even doing before I was even doing advertising. I mean, they did such an amazing job with the Skittles work back then. Like, I was just riding on their coattails. Like, they did the work of creating this amazing universe. And that's a universe that's interesting, that I would like to spend an hour in. I would not like to spend an hour listening to people sing about Liberty Mutual Insurance, you know? And it's just like, it's worth noting, because you got to be honest about like what you're making. Like, would I actually care about this? You know, like if I saw it, I hold myself to that standard, and it's like, I feel like everybody should. It's like, you should definitely not, let's be honest here. Sometimes you're just trying to get your paycheck and do your job and make it happen. But if you're really trying to make a good piece of creative work, ask yourself, like, would I want to see this? And if the answer is not yes, then like come up with a better idea. Make it something you would want to see.
Yeah. I think I like to think I'm a very, very, very tough critic on work, and you are even tougher on yourself, having worked with you. You and Croy I've never worked with any creatives that kill their own work more often, where you present something to me, and
but to be clear,
you come back and say like, hey, that idea that you said you liked, I think it's bad. I think you should kill it.
Yeah. Well, and it's like, you know, not like, don't confuse me being tough on myself and my own work as being like down on myself. It's not like a bad thing. It's more just like, I'm just being honest with myself. And it's like, yeah, exactly. Like if I think like, if a CD has said, here's what used to happen to me. Like, I think this is true. And I still feel this is true, which is that like every single time I get a brief, I feel anxiety. Like, am I going to be able to solve this brief? Like, as creatives, we're asked to come up with something out of thin air and produce something that works. And all the pressure is on us. It's like everyone's waiting to see what we created. And that is inherently anxiety producing. And like, there is a big temptation or a big like need to just quell that anxiety. And like, as soon as we come up with something that other people are like responding to or feel like has solved the problem for them, there's a tendency, I think, for us to just go, oh, thank God. Like, okay, yeah, then it must fine. If they like it, it must be good. Or if that CD above me likes it, then it must be good. And, you know, to some degree, that's worth considering, especially when you're new in the business, like you don't have a ton of experience. Like, try to work with good CDs and have some trust in them, you know. But at the same time, too, it shouldn't stop us from, or at least I'll speak for myself. I try not to let it stop me from keeping going and seeing if I can beat that, even if a CD says they like it, or even if I feel a lot of pressure to get something to solve a brief or whatever. Like, I still try to keep going on it and try to come up with something, keep coming up with ideas until I find something that I feel inherently happy with. Another thing too is like being honest with myself about the creative work, and also being honest about the brand and the product and the brief, I think is really important. Like saying to myself, like, what is a thing that you could tell me about this product that I wouldn't call bullshit on? Like an insight about it. Like, you know, because a lot of times the brief is totally full of itself. It's either coming from a client who eats, sleeps, drinks, and thinks nothing but their brand and their product. And they're so full of their brand, they think everybody is, you know, they've drunk the Kool-Aid and they feel like everyone should know all this stuff about it. And they might have, you know, presented a brief that is just like too muddied up with nonsense or something. And I like to try to parse through that and come up with it might be inspired by the brief. It might, or it might not. I might have to come up with it on my own. But what is a thing I could say, a benefit, a product insight, whatever, about this product that I truly would not call bullshit on? And then start from there. So it's really about like, there's a theme here, I guess, of being like really rigorously honest about stuff. Like, don't kid yourself about things. Like, just try to take a step back and really look at it, like from a critical point of view, like from a jaded point of view almost. And like, if you can get it past the jaded guy, then you'll relate it to everybody, you know?
Yeah. And I think
I'm just very jaded.
One of the values, like a huge value that you bring to a client is an outside perspective. That's why I think it's a watch out. It's something that internal creative departments have to be careful of. It's not that it's impossible, but it's harder to maintain that outsider perspective when you're in-house. And there's examples of companies that have done great work that are in-house. But it really is your value. Like, you shouldn't think like the value that we brought to Old Spice was that we're not P&G. We're not inside that, swimming in that water of the P&G building.
There's a bunch more stuff in here, and I'll try to move a little faster. But Logitech Ivan Kobank, I put that in the wrong order. I wanted to put a shout out to Ring and Ledwidge, who passed away recently. Really beautiful guy, very kind. I got to work with him on this spot. I mean, a brilliant director. Everybody knows him, of course. But like, I really wanted to point out that like, he was the best example that I've worked with of a guy who was an absolutely brilliant director and was willing to say, no, we're doing it this way. But at the same time was a very kind and warm and like easygoing human being, and was respectful of everybody. And that was a really special combination. So anyway, may he rest in peace. Now let's watch the Kevin Bacon ad. Fucking hell, Jason, you fucked up this deck.
My favorite actor? Oh, that's easy. Kevin Bacon, obviously. His best movie is probably a tie between all of them. I do a Kevin Bacon impression. This valley's just one long smorgasbord. They're under the ground. It's Tremors. It's of me and Kevin. I've never actually met him. I had it commissioned. Am I obsessed with Kevin Bacon? I don't know. Obsessed is a strong word. I think I'm a devoted fan. And you know, the Logitech review is just perfect for me because I just type in Kevin Bacon and it uses Google TV, finds all kinds of movies and shows and YouTube videos. So let's just say I happen to be in the mood for, I don't know, a movie about a rebellious teen who's living in a town where dancing is illegal. There it is. Let's dance! Yeah, my wife says if I watch any more Kevin Bacon, I might actually turn into Kevin Bacon.
Add Google TV to your television with the Logitech review. If you can think it, you can watch it.
Okay, evolution of an idea. Great scripts don't just arrive fully formed in a single flash of brilliance. I don't want to go through each of these scripts, but I was telling Jason a funny story that me and Croy Gagnon, who worked on this ad together, with creative directors, mostly with David Kolbus and with Margaret as well from, I'm blanking on her last name, from Goodby. This is when I was at Goodby. Anyway, we actually tried to sell David off of the Kevin Bacon idea and onto this totally forgettable script called Zombies, which would have just been just the most boring, forgettable script, so it's kind of funny, but it was one of, there was a deck I found. I went digging into an old hard drive to find this stuff. There was a deck of probably, 20 different scripts we had written for this particular product, which was like it's nothing now, but at the time it was sort of novel. It was like a remote that you could type in, your search into. Now we just use like the little button with the voice command on our Apple TV or whatever. But at the time it was like a new thing. You could type in a search for whatever you wanted to watch and it would bring it up. This was another Kevin Bacon script. I don't remember like what order this came in, but it was like a different idea where it was like all the different Kevin Bacon characters from different movies. And they're like sitting, I didn't even reread this, but I think they're basically like in a waiting room. And when someone calls them up, they get like, oh, I'm up. Like it's my turn now. Cause the guy wants to watch Apollo 13 and now he wants to watch Tremors or whatever. Kind of a dumb idea in my opinion now looking back on it. This is interesting. This was the first iteration of the Kevin Bacon script. It was basically just a sort of Christopher Guest sort of ish, like mockumentary style, basically exactly what you just watched, except instead of Kevin Bacon playing his biggest fan, it was just going to be some lady who happens to be Kevin Bacon's biggest fan. So she says, what can I say? I love Kevin Bacon, and she's in this house surrounded by all this Kevin Bacon stuff, just like we saw in the final ad. He's the best actor in the world, obviously. This is an actual piece of bacon that Kevin Bacon ate part of. With the caw, I think that was just a code word for the product. All I have to do is type in Kevin Bacon, and I immediately get Kevin Bacon movies, TV shows, and Kevin Bacon clips from Hulu and YouTube. Order up sizzling hot Kevin Bacon right on my TV. And then she tries to do a move from Footloose and crashes into a curio case. And then she says, I'm working on that one. Whatever you're into, get all you want. Find content from TV and the internet in one easy search. So it's interesting because that was the original iteration of this script. It was just a lady who's and it's like there's like documentary about people who are obsessed with like Debbie Gibson, and it's like these are sort of these weird characters, and it could have been like an interesting, if you cast it right, she could have been interesting, but still it would have been not a very memorable spot at all. And I remember taking this to, yeah,
I definitely would. I remember taking this. Definitely kill that spot right there.
Yeah, I took it along with a bunch of other ideas. It was like round 5 or something. I was just chatting with David CD on this, and I was like telling him this one, and he was, I don't remember like verbatim, but the gist of it was that he was kind of like, yeah, I don't know, it's okay, nothing that special there. And I was just sort of riffing it with him, and I'm like, well, what if the lady, instead of a lady, it's Kevin Bacon talking about himself, and he's like playing. And then we sort of immediately, he was like, okay, boom, there's something interesting there. Like that was immediately changed everything. And then we kind of, the more we riffed it, we sort of settled on it's like, it's funnier if he's not Kevin Bacon himself, but like Kevin Bacon playing a random guy who happens to be a mega Kevin Bacon fan. Like, and I guess the lesson here is like, there's a fine line in this case between, and here's the first version of the script with Bacon. And you can see like some of this was actually, well, I've seen all those movies, every one of them. Yeah, so none of the dialogue I think is the same here. But, you know, when we shot that, we kind of shot it mockumentary style, and we shot so many lines. We wrote pages upon pages of like alt lines and stuff. There's another side lesson in that, alts, right? A million alts if you're a writer. Like half the time the final edit becomes built out of all the different alts. But I think the lesson here is that like there's a fine line between like a very mediocre script and a really interesting script. So all it was that little degree change of like Kevin Bacon is playing the person rather than some random actor that we cast in LA playing the person. And Jason and I were talking about this, kind of like trying to figure out like, why is that interesting? And I don't know if I could say why exactly, but I can say that like, at one point, Kevin Bacon was apparently not going to be able to do it. And then we started sending it to other actors. And it was like, we had like Matthew Broderick on the line at one point, and he was going to maybe do it. And it's like, it still works with Matthew Broderick. And then I was saying like, yeah, well, would it work with like Wayne Gretzky playing like a hockey fan who loves to watch all things hockey? And it's like, yeah, that does work. That actually works too. So clearly there's like a strong concept there. There's a hook. There's these words, concept, strategy, insight, idea, like they all kind of get like intermixed in our business a bit. And sometimes it's hard to define exactly what a concept is, but I think like, I like to think of this as like, there's a hook, right? It's essentially the same script with the same, in fact, this is just an example of a very hard working script where someone is literally just talking about the product, which is a whole genre of ad in and of itself, right? The ad where someone just literally talks about the product.
To me, the clearest. Sorry, go ahead. Finish.
Well, just the end of that thought was just that it's made interesting because there's a hook, and it's like the strategy is the same in either version, right? It's just about someone who has a specific interest that is fulfilled by the benefit of that product. Like it's very straightforward. And it's like both characters, whether it's the lady or Kevin Bacon playing his own fan, get the same benefit from the product. It's just that, so that the insight is the same in both scripts. The benefit is the same, but it's like, there isn't much of a concept, if any, in the first one, whereas in the second one, there's a concept and there's a hook, and it makes it interesting, and it forces the viewer maybe to do some of the math, is one of the ways I like to think about it. Like, it makes me have to like, it involves me in the story, because I am the one who has to make the connection between like, that's Kevin Bacon there, and he's talking about himself. That's not spoon-fed to me. So it suddenly makes me a player in the story. And I think that's an important aspect in a lot of good ads.
Yeah.
What were you going to say?
To me, the clearest definition of what a conceptual idea is two existing things combined in a unique or unexpected way. And I think this is a perfect example. In the first version of the script, there's not really anything new combined. There's not really two things combined in a new way. Seeing somebody that's obsessed with a celebrity, I've seen that before. That there's nothing new there. As soon as you add somebody who's obsessed with a celebrity being played by that celebrity as a character, now you've instantly combined. Kevin Bacon has played many characters. He's a character actor. He's played many characters. There's been regular people obsessed with celebrities. It's when you combine those two things that makes it instantly a conceptual idea, and something I've never seen before.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is about creating a world, and this is about like details, right? So details matter, and in this case, this is not even the full thing. I just inserted some pages of this massive deck that we built to give to Ringen and his team once they were on board. An exploration of like, what are all the things that are surrounding this guy, you know? And a lot of attention was given to that. We went through lists of his movies. We thought about what are the things that a super fan would do, right? Like have like a portrait done, and we took great care to like detail out this portrait. In fact, like the portrait that you see there, which now hangs in my own house, by the way, but you see it it plays a role in the story, of course. That's me and David Kolbus posing for the artist. Like, we had one shot at making this thing great, and we wanted to make sure that it was amazing. And we wrote in great detail, like, you know, the character on the chairs is just in his socks. We put like what clothes he's wearing. We gave references. You know, it was like, we were not about to just say, oh, they'll come up with something, you know, and that's just me. I mean, that is just fundamentally who I am as a creative person, is that like the details matter so much to me. And like anyone that works with me will tell you the same. And like, it's really like, to me, it's an ad like this comes down to the details, right? Like there's a good script there, but you could botch the execution too. You know, you could make it, this is just my opinion. Like you could make it very broad. It needed to be played very straight, in my opinion. But again, that's just a taste thing. The details were very important. You could botch the details or not have the details, and all those things would like ding the ad like until it was no longer good. So to me, that stuff's super, super important. Details matter so much. You know, down to like, we wanted the calendar on the wall to say Friday the 13th because that was Kevin Bacon's first movie, and just lists and lists and lists of stuff. And we went around and around on that. So references for what the character actually looks like. I think that one on the right there was one of the primary like actual references that we used. You can see the resemblance there. But just, you know, turning him into a regular ass person was really critical for us. So that was a big part of the idea.
The few times that I've been able to work with like legitimate famous people who are famous for their acting ability, it was kind of mind blowing how good they were at their craft. Like, who am I thinking of? Fargo. What's his name?
William H. Macy?
William H. Macy. Like, we had William H. Macy in a Samsung spot, and he shows up. He found out about it the day before. He's not, you know, he did whatever prep you do. But if you told him, that was great, can you just put 10% more sarcasm on that read? He would deliver exactly 10% more sarcasm on the next read. If you're like, can you just add a little bit more insecurity to that performance? I mean, it was just like, he was like a surgical instrument when it came to taking direction. What was it like working with Kevin? I call him Kevin because we're friends.
Yeah. Well, he was very super professional. It was the first time I'd worked with a real celebrity. And yeah, I mean, I think what celebrities do is they remind us how like acting, like anything else, is a craft and a skill. And it's like, there's a whole spectrum of talent there. And like, we often have to work with people that are very far on the opposite end of that spectrum. They're just starting out in their careers, or they're not very good. Or, I mean, there's plenty of really great actors in our field that work on commercials, and you see them over and over and over again for that reason, right? That's why you see the same like 10 people in every commercial, right? I find with casting, another little side tip here, you're usually, because you're dealing with a pool of actors that aren't Kevin Bacon's and William H. Macy's, you're usually trying to do one of two things. You're trying to find a guy or a girl or whatever, a person who can act and decently portray a character or an emotion or whatever it is that you've written. And that's possible, but that pool is pretty small in the commercial acting world. Or you're trying to find someone who can't. 9 roles you would give them, they would be horrible. But for some reason, when they read this one character you wrote, it just works really well with them. Like, it's almost like they're good at it by accident. And I find that, like, that's actually a more surprising and delightful sort of discovery, because those are the kind of people that you're going to go, oh my God, I never even pictured that this line I wrote could be so funny or so interesting until I heard this weird guy read it or something, you know? And so I actually prefer to find that kind of thing. But time and time again, I've had those same people come in for other roles and other campaigns. And I've just been like, what happened? Like, that guy was so good at that one thing. And when you have him do a different thing, he just cannot do it.
I've also had the worst,
Kevin Bacon. Yeah.
I've also had the worst experience where the first thing happens where they're not a good actor, but they just, in the audition, they just do it so funny. And then when you get on set,
they practice.
When they practice it, they can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
And you can't, and because they're not a good actor, you can't coach them back to it.
Right. I know. It's true.
Anyway.
But Kevin Bacon, yeah, he was incredible. I mean, as soon as you work with like a professional actor, you're like, oh, that's what acting is. Like, that guy is amazing.
That's why they get paid a lot of money.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's Kevin Bacon. There's me and Croy and Kevin Bacon. Old Spice bar soap. This was a campaign I did with Jason and Craig. We're going to watch a few ads and then we'll talk about them.
Sorry for cutting Nathaniel and Jason off. If you want to finish the remainder of the podcast, check out schoolofastonishingpursuits.com and apply for Creative Mega Machine. If you get in, Jason Bagley himself will teach you the secrets and techniques to doing the best work of your life, getting better creative opportunities, making more money, and having more fun. We hope you enjoyed the first part of the episode, and we hope to see you in the second.